When I think about everything that I've learned in my SLS 3200 class, I think about all the skills and knowledge that I now have as a teacher and as a mentor. As I look at the objectives, I am able to recognize that I have been able to meet the objectives for class. When it comes to demonstrating effective leadership and mentoring skills, I have been able to use the concepts that we are learning with my students as I am teaching the TOEFL level for my ESL students. And I've used lessons like chapters from the Pure Mentor textbook, helping them recognize the importance of self-concept, self-esteem, and self-awareness. I've also walked them through Bloom's taxonomy. And the reason I did this is because I believe that students should recognize what a good education looks like and what good learning looks like, and being able to see the levels of learning and what constitutes as proper learning. They're able to recognize what they should be receiving as students. And I've also been able to walk them through SMART goals, and I give them time to create goals for themselves, long-term and short-term. When it comes to heightened levels of self-awareness, seeing that I had taught my students, I had given them a chance to read the chapter in the Pure Mentor textbook. We had a really good discussion about what self-concept is, why self-esteem is important, and how that influences self-efficacy. And being ESL students in a foreign country, trying to learn a different language, you're able to see how they can tie these principles into their learning. I was able to sit down with them and help them write goals, which also impacts their learning but also their growth. And seeing that they're able to use these principles on their own gives me a realization that all these principles are not just for mentors and teachers, but for everyone in general. When it comes to model effective learning skills and strategies, I had mentioned earlier that I had taught my students Bloom's taxonomy. Not only that, but I had created an activity where students were to use Bloom's taxonomy and create a lesson for themselves. And so I had students who were able to facilitate learning, which is the fourth objective. I had a group that taught about healthy eating, another group that taught about, they taught CPR, another group who taught how to comfort someone who's having a breakdown, even if they're strangers, and another group who taught a simple principle that can be used in photography. And what I saw was how they were able to apply different parts of Bloom's taxonomy, like understanding, and all the way to the level of creating, and how they're able to apply this and implement this in their learning. This gives them a chance to recognize the type of learning they should be receiving, and that if it doesn't meet any of these standards, or if it only meets the lowest but not creating, then they need to be pushing for better education themselves, being advocates of their learning. I was able to see how UVU has influenced me as a student and as someone who's preparing to be a teacher, and I've been able to influence my ESL students. Not only that, but I was able to help my students in this teacher leadership and mentor leadership class by pointing them towards the multicultural students office, which I think is a great resource, especially when it comes to cultural sensitivity and learning and trying to understand different cultures. When it comes to the most meaningful things that I've learned about myself this semester, I love the textbook, the book that we read about being in the box. I made my husband read it, and so we have discussions about it. And it helped me see who I am and what I would like to be, the kind of person I would like to be in general. And I was able to reflect on the things that I can improve on. My relationship with my husband is better, rather than trying to think that it is all his fault and that he's always blaming me. I recognize that there's a lot of things that is just all in my head, and that all I have to do is rather than just think about how it's impacting me, but really how it is impacting my spouse and my son. And now that my parents are here from Fiji, I am able to apply it with them as well. Another thing that I learned that has been the biggest influence in my learning is doing the mentor project that my group worked on, and it was focused on first generation students. And while we were focusing on students here in the US, I also did some background research about students in Fiji who are considered first generation students, especially since they are coming here to the US. And I reached out to someone at BYU Hawaii, since a lot of Fijians go to BYU Hawaii, and I discovered that out of the 252 students that were admitted into schools, 9 are not first generation and the remainder are first generation. And so this project, while it was focused here, I have the mind to do something like this back in Fiji, where I will raise awareness and help high school students know that there are learning opportunities here in the US. It just takes learning, and it just takes reaching out to people, to knowledgeable people, to make that work. Excuse me. When it comes to facilitating learning in others, I've recognized that a lot of these principles applied with my ESL students. I have seen them grow in so many ways. We've had such amazing discussions, especially about their learning, about their growth, about their goals, about the kind of students they want to be. And while some of them do plan to further their education, they also are able to apply this in the careers that they want to jump into their relationships. Now that I think about my experience with design thinking, about empathy, defining, ideation, prototyping, and testing, and how I was able to interview various friends in regards to our mentor project, I realized how these steps of ideas apply to any type of idea that we intend to implement. One of my biggest goals as an educator is to learn and to develop my education skills here as a teacher and as an educator, and then to return home and hopefully create curriculums or to set up programs where teachers are trained to work with students from different facets of life who have various cultural backgrounds or socioeconomic backgrounds. And I think that this, and I not just think, but I know that this design thinking can be applied to all areas of design creation, design implementation. And as I think about the steps that we are taking to create our own mentor project, I know that I have the steps and the skills that I need to create more programs or projects for myself. It's not going to be easy, but these steps will help me along the way. My biggest frustration with this course wasn't about the work. I really loved the work, and I loved how much time and effort were put into each chapter, each quiz. I think if I had a choice, I would have done face-to-face so that it wasn't rushed. I really enjoyed their learning, and it took me only a day or two to read the whole book. But I know that if it was a much longer semester, if it was a semester long, then I would have put more emphasis and work on a project so that it didn't seem rushed, that there was more careful planning or thoughtful planning. It was more specific, or it was more detailed. My final takeout for this class is that I recommend anyone and everyone to take it. I wish I had learned about the leadership certification way before this semester, because it would have influenced the kind of classes I'd taken, and I would have planned my semester, my learning experience at UVU, so that at the end of my graduation I would have received the certification. But other than that, I really appreciated everything that was taught, that was learned, the materials that we read in class. A lot of the times I felt that with other classes, a lot of the materials were not needed, but in this class, those two texts, the self-deception book and the peer mentor textbook, were critical to my learning and growth. So I really appreciate everything that I've learned, and I appreciate all the help that I've received thus far.